was almost immediately yo kabaira ro moteneli bwe kyombekeli ke IEBC akanyara kubaka ukora na monega siaye munere kawaida tu bas kyombeke IEBC bono kuruelio pakalero nkeri place na ndimo nakomanya mancho waliria oikraboniga we have wards tubate kibunge kinke kigabuna kiwodi munabona nakomanya ward ili ya Nyamaia which is very famous currently aso tatuara omo MCA magayo mo MCA obo gokwa. It has been time almost 2 years down the line tutana kutuara omo MCA sekinsema kiri negati yechi ward chinde gati yechi nyinge munabona wasema tukabongo iga we have experienced resignations chiko korwa naba aba senator ana mono kurwa se NCT ya Kenya kwa rasama tukabongo iga senator nara ali resign ya sekeli yao tauna magaga ya impeachment ya mokonyi bumara ibwenze rigati gashagwa uyo kabero mokonyi ibwenze rigati gashagwa oikeraniwa. He was among those people balinka against Gachagua kuma impeached na magaga yayo ekarolekana nga otwaro ko kosereri wakubo gimabwaye agaikirige tambo kiryo gotebanga bono inche tigandi sign gabono mancho burilia ekayena kianga senator yenseme yutai wikraboni, which means it calls for a by-election. The same thing happens to Nyamaia. Ne chinde chinyinge tanyari ko chinyore chinde boniga. Nombo ata wakili mukaya itukolera me nyumba magani ona okurukwandu muchachi nero kagiriko ikaiga na bwate benyega awo yemerubiri nyangi bono lende kwikatura give room arasoma ko titukolera lero turakwana na wakili mukaya turamanya ki who should we blame aso tabaroro kwa mangana ya IEBC monchurire kwa rasa matuka bango iga kero broad based government ko chikorosiwa kwa rochera ila Mondo Odinga na regana mumore wense William Samoei Ruto bakomerana kabisa tukaraba ko beke seya nene kabisa yoko ene kianga IEBC ko chikobere in place. Since then tojenga bada matuko na baganda tukominyoka there is no sign ekoro kianga IEBC nero aina mangana tuko kwa nero wakili. Meanwhile, karibu sana menyo.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for coming. Machire kwa libaga ya suma chubuli omukwani omumanyenga eningo krokende.
Biamono seri bageli chenkoro ku mwakili mukaya John Mumanyi no motegere radio station ye na no mukazi of Kisii County. No colleagues as an advocate of the High Court of Kenya in Kisii, Nairobi and within the High Court of the Republic ya Kenya. Na agokire kurangirwa na gochago share se mangana unaye.
Sure.
Biamono.
Mukaya totaracha kama ngana IEBC ngana neregendera se mitundao Ruto na cheta se county Taita Taveta. Na yoko nda se county Taita Taveta asega teaching kwa na chiaye. He has been seeing blaming Kenyans so tebeka na the Kenya mbachangite sana asediri ya adan kwa cancelled na rojali yoko tebanga what gain do you get when you stop the building of an airport in your country? You have no due how it is going to be built. Wale wanapinga hata hawajui hawajai kanyaga airport, unapinga tu. Huyo ni Ruto alisema haya maneno. Meanwhile to quote a little bit, what do you think about this?
In my view, as Kwana Netaya, this is a bitter president. A president whose projects go saving to Viriata geteko kolera ba Kenya ebinge we could lead to taxing ere igoromono na kabere vitali go sikonyora approval ya ba Kenya. Like for instance, we are talking of airports. How many Kenyans? Of course, ingo konyere koleta revenue to the republic, but how many Kenyans of the 50 or 40 million Kenyans? How many travel using our airports? Most of us chipara to gotumia na bali hapa keba gotumia the airports here within the republic are very few compared to bali baraga ni chipara chirosi.
Sure.
And you know encherako agokwana nobororo ekoro kinga he had interests na gokana kwa ba Kenya gokole bintebi. You know Kenyans has a leader utakere ko involve aba Kenya sebinto video gukora kwa baelezera kwarora. If we recall very well during the leadership ya Uhuru Kenyatta, very few projects aba Kenya bari gukana because they would relate they would approve na yeikera no nekero bakuna chwe tax waka na baitabete. Now why the difference? Because Mokenya tara feel obwansu which project ya serikali, and that is why bagokana. I believe he was addressing the judiciary because Kenyans, of course, bakanete in the social media and other platforms, but the people who put a stop to it were the judiciary. Now, once people or Kenyans went to court, the judiciary got the implementation of those projects. And I believe from the harsh words, he was addressing the judges and the judiciary. He assumed that then they should have because if the judiciary had not stopped, given orders to stop the execution, contract, so he's a bitter president who I feel does not care about the common Kenyan. He cares about those Kenyans at the level you know, some of the Kenyans who travel using the airports, Talibanto, and supermarket, they rarely walk there. They don't know whether Kenyans have money or not. So he's a bitter president, I would say, who needs to sit down and recollect and know that whatever he's doing is for the people. So then he should involve the people in every decision he makes. Was a project initiate. Yes.
Maybe on the same slightly, Sifuna almost Senator Nairobi.
True.
He came out, he said what he feels about Kenya batagete taliogokana.
Yes.
Just transparency.
Yes.
On the same thing, Kero aligo address bantu through the National Assembly. I mean, aligo yekane tili yega. Most of the people reactions say US did not find their done deal probably Kenya so considering mangana aruto kaletaita taveta considering a statement ya yekerali Kwana National Assembly and considering other leaders' views on mangana transparency. Does it mean the president was not igakomanya how the deal was corrupt?
It now is clear. Wono yarole kanirenga nero mwenyano liko control the process because kero mangana ya rumors chagete gocha. You know, it began by rumanga one of the CSs of Watiru in Dubai with billions of dollars in form of corruption. The president never uttered a word agakira throughout. He went ahead bakaena na the Ketrako chetenda gochia electricity supply gochia sadani bakaena na airport bakaena na supply is it internet or some connection to Shad, now the current NHIF. So after all these has failed, is coming out, but then it means he had an influence, he had a hand in it. Na nyalete ko nero renge ime batari go to make a TCS GPS konyara go implement obokurumiobo. And clearly, if there was information, look, in the US Adani, the director, one of the directors by the Adani company was arrested and is in court. Amachika Kenya under procurement laws do not allow the ones you go through for corruption contract. That is why we had to cancel it. The president had no option. But now the way he's cancelling it, tells us that he had an interest. Initially, if he was transparent, minister nera ya Edruchi besa chinga niga ligera ya Dani contract. That was the CS then for transport. Why would the country proceed as a president? He never got worried. He's now getting worried. What is his personal interest? Kenyans have refused it, and the whole world, even the US, has proved that these Adani company. It is involved in deals to make money for themselves and maybe for a few state officers. So the president has a lot to tell Kenyans, and indeed, because of evolution, he was forced to. Because one, the courts gave an order, and two, that Adani, the contractor who was contracted for has been found and has been charged for corrupt deals in other countries, including the US.
Sure. Pachoborelia nigotwara kurakuni akege singenjo ina chinkwana chumara iwense William Samoei Ruto chinga kyalenga state taveta kago oblema bakenya sana asoko genda mamincha ne edile ya Dani abakenya bange ba complain tinano na wakila tebira krabagenda se court judiciary ikateneni the proceeding of a deal ya done go justice ya Kenya. But meanwhile usikabosio litukole yale romo ancho mureria nikutete tukuburani inkikerete paka sai IEBC tali in place. I want us to start from there, and I want to give Wakili Ribaga ara tuere number 1. Wakili ngotu wana tukublema soko tapo kwa IEBC in place.
Establishment of independent commissions is a duty of the executive, and the leader of the executive, the president. We see Salaries and Remuneration Commission through the CSS, of course, who makes appointments. Kenya Human Rights Commission who make appointment through the CSS. So even appointment of IEBC, the IEBC commissioners resigned after the elections or during the elections, the 2022 elections. There were scuffles, there was a misunderstanding. We had 5 commissioners resigning, and we have the chairperson later on, Okaritaya, his term Mekaera. Those officers have not been replaced. That is a duty of the executive, a duty of the president directly. And he has been adamant to replace these officers. We know the law requires that he replaces these officers. Actually, the functioning of IEBC are very crippled completely. You mentioned a few wards. We have 4 wards in the country. Chitaraba, replacement chair MCAs, Batayo, Bandebasirete. We have almost 4 constituencies. Nachiro Chuchitaranyo are members of parliament, because the IEBC is not functioning. Beyond the elections, Chioka, there is a requirement under Article 88 of the Constitution where IEBC is formed, and the IEBC Act. IEBC nebwate mandate yoko and continuous voter registration and continuous voter sensitization, which we are not seeing. I've not seen an advert ya IEBC on any TV station in the Republic. I mean, this was something that is supposed to happen all through. Continuous voter registration after 1 or 2 years after elections 2022. We expect that after mwako yomoko severe, there are so many voters who have not been registered. I mean, those should be captured, and that is a continuous process. IEBC cannot proceed asing enjonga tebuati commissioners boniga bali batatu bali baro. They do not meet the quorum yoko nyara ko make a decision. No okora no any referendum, you know, no any an election. They can't even vet the candidates. So there is a challenge, and the ball stops as a court here president. Why he does not want to do that, we all don't know. They got into some arrangement. Now the opposition leader Raila Odinga formed a caucus committee reforms or proposed election reforms, including IEBC. The same have been presented to the president. He signed an IEBC amendment bill a month or so ago. We expect that the law actually requires 2 years to an election if commissioners Mbaraba field. If any commissioner comes less than 2 years before election, they may not take part in those elections. So there is a requirement there on the president to establish IEBC today. Wakili, and it's an emergency. Wakili,
we are doing good. The only problem I have, is 2024. Some 2 years or so to 2027.
Yes, to an election.
So does that one mean 2027 into what elections?
That could be the plan of the executive. It could be a plan. My saying, tinda tebanga nere plan. But if IEBC is forming according to the IEBC Act and the Constitution too late to the election, then it means those commissioners appointed cannot oversee an election. We will not say there can't be an election. The law provides that after every 5 years there must be an election. What we will then have is a scenario. Take a committee. Ya leadership as a presidency at the executive level, maybe for 5 or 6 months, toganyete go establish IEBC. That means the president would be in office for 6 months illegally, or for 5 months illegally as they constitute IEBC, which is a scenario Kenyans would really mbatageti. Ondeta yotagete ruta bere in office for more than tate nego jime. Batagete ba moirani ko se ba morusi. So it's a scheme, it's a plan, but I know other bodies, including civil societies, the church, pressure, you know, church gave an ultimatum, 1 or so weeks, the IEBC ever established. So Kenyans and the civil society are putting pressure on the president. He's reluctant, but finally we know that I can tell you Dichiko will catch up with him, and he'll have no option but to establish and constitute IEBC. Yes.
Wancho magile bunugete wakili agenda takoerera nechinchera number one, there are possibilities kiagara bunako whatever na njira bomete igonga it should be at least in office 3 years before elections. But it's called libuye ne miaka ibiri na totigaliti to some 2 years and some months iga to so choli abu mwaka chilifu ne mronge ibiri na isano na ibiri. Currently bunako na wakili areire we have wards, we have counties, chitabuati senators, we have constituencies, chitabuati ababunge. How should we go about it? Wakili abantu ababoni gabatabuati representatives either in the county assembly or in the national assembly. How ngakiwa wanatakomenya?
That is I believed before we impeached Gachagua for any reason the president would have been held accountable for not establishing IEBC because he is failing. This is a duty that is based if our legislature, if our MPs were genuine, they would have first begun by questioning the president. Even if that impeachment was to come for failing to execute his duties, then should have come against the president. But Kwana. Now, these people, what about the representation? You know, it is sad that in the assembly, views change on Chirikoika. At the national level in parliament or the Senate, you are not represented. And you know, Kenyans, the constitution provides for those positions a article or section indicating a representation. You know, now we are not represented, or these regions are not represented. It is absurd. But you saw Moisonde, they passed, the executive, the president passed, is trying to pass a bill, live streaming elections, you know, we don't have an IEBC, but we are already foreseeing live streaming, and we want Kenyans are worried, and any normal thinking Kenyan would worry, Ninke president beyond 2027, because he does not want live streaming. He's putting an amendment. He does not want to put up IEBC or delay it tactically, So Kenyans should be worried. And in our kaka, sometimes we talk and say we foresee, God forbid, that in 2027 it might be worse than 2007, because the scenarios, the incherebi ntogi andatako korwa, korrekananga montonaro tagete kerogeke by chinguru, gose konyara ko manipulate Kenyans to a certain direction. We pray and hope that the president is held accountable. Aba jumbe baito na ba MP baito wale ko igora mato barole baache open and question. That is their work. Konyara go audit the executive, which they are not doing, because the president they jump left, left, what they right, left. They are not questioning the executive, and the executive has had a leeway using the powers of what in parliament. Yes.
Maybe if I may ask Wakili, before broad-based government abantu kurobekana sana, forcing finance bill 2024 kuba kicked out tebasa kuitiwa, and after that one, that is when one troche broad-based government ekoroisiwa na mno kuga kwa ndanga Raila mba umera tena Ruto bakarosie kamati ibwanete go lead ogotwara kwa IEBC in place. Do you think ina twara gotwara a strong opposition ibone broad-based anga IEBC are very in place kuchianga things are being pushed? Because recently Karabali ngetaita taveta Moisonde I overheard Ali Hassan Joho uyu previous Urenge is very serious. Urenge go call the president to be very much accountable keregento bono very side ye president. If he was even warning people bantu bande bonse bako inside nona bantu bako tume online go criticize what the president is doing. Do you think ingangonye to twara opposition is very strong angantu bwata IEBC in place currently?
I strongly believe had the opposition been working, anga IEBC abere. Reason, legally, how did we come up with this committee, the subcommittee aroseptigu yogo chiko give suggestions na kia IEBC yako established? It's because of the maandamanos Baba did. Baba was on the streets, and one of the demands he had is the establishment of IEBC.
Very true.
He said amendments chikorua said the IEBC Act. That is why Ruto acted very fast out of fear. Kabarangire maandamano mchutorosi IEBC. Had the opposition remained steadfast, today angantobwate IEBC, because the committee would have given a report. Immediately after the report, establishment was the process starts running. But since opposition kamerua ne serikali, now after the broad-based kind of setup, one opposition yakule, you saw Juneta Watabana, the leader of opposition, and is speaking on behalf of government. You know, it beats logic. The opposition that is currently led by Musyoka and Eugene and others are not pushing enough. Sure. Now, the only opposition leader apart from the president, Raila, who was Serikali. That is part of the weaknesses to what the president has managed to coira the opposition. But no, what he says, the opposition speaks it louder. Actually, he thinks the opposition yamo kwanera. So now, scenario to tabu at the opposition. Sure. And that is why the president is reluctant. The president are relaxed. He has put in the foot soldiers of opposition in government. And they are now speaking for government. Sure. Part of the laxity is because we lack a strong opposition. Yeah.
Maybe as a possibility. What if the government is pushing very much AU, and that one will be at least relieve the government pushed so much we can even to be. But on the other hand, what if Raila Tara, do you think he will come back and still remain the project-based government?
From the talk, from the words chair opposition, Junet, when Junet speaks, he speaks on behalf of Baba. From the words Chia Joho, Oparanya, those are the big wigs, ODM, now that is the opposition. They speak Konyara Korokyo Mokenyanga, they are in government and they are not willing Kororo. When you hear Juneta Goteva 2027 on the Tayom Serakari Yakolide Kibata Getembaliko Yepinga, you know that what he was saying?
He said so.
He was saying in Serakari to Atevatengo Korostolichi Para Yarosi, Korostolichi Nyomba Yarosi, Kirende Toko Yepinga. That is to say, ODM and Kenya Kwanza are in support of government. That is beyond 2027, Uchimoto. But if Baba does not win, if he wins this position, we are sure once you win the AU chair, you are barred from taking part in national politics and other countries. You now become a father figure of the African region, of the African continent. So you will not take part directly. But if he loses, we are sure, we don't know, but I believe if Baba is not in AU, where else would he be? Maybe as a prime minister in Ruto's government, or as a deputy, it is possible, you never know. So he will definitely be in this government. But let's also look at it. Lazima Baba opposition imanyakoba. We have very other strong candidates, but evident Mutata is one of them. Kenyans trust him. We have rumors out here that Matiang'i has declared, and that is another wing that Yabeire Kalonzo is there.
Sure.
There would other forms Chigo Chachia opposition, which would I believe would be very strong than even Baba. If Baba decides to retire and join government or join AU, well, we wish him well. But the Kenyans, through other faces, are coming up now a strong opposition, which we believe to level develop. Yes.
Maybe what are the possibilities? The possibilities is very serious, and it is and you have echoed them. You know, those are people we as Kenyans really dependent. One of them being IEBC. What are some possibilities to work for IEBC Kobaro?
Kenyans
maybe on the same when we got to our Nandi Senator Samson Cherargei pushing for a term limit extension. Do you think kerokenda serikali ke kanyegete? Meanwhile, back all strategies to extend the term limit ya elected leaders.
I would answer and say with the current presidency of the executive, really anything is possible. You can't trust him to keep the rule of law. You can't, Kenyans have said, and it's all over. He lies a lot, sorry to use those words. And you can't, predict ninke president yepangete mambia. So even when Cheral Gay or a close follower, ye president, and a member of the Kenya Kwanza government, and the UDA party, agocha kobeke bill, you will extend the presidential term limit. Well, he has his freedom. We could imagine now about the freedom of thought. Maybe Taraba influenced the president. But sometimes kero korali sese kokoka na ngoma no mwenye no yetoma, so we could know ni ngoma mwenye nebu sese. Now we are suspecting he is in that. Now the delaying tactics ako korako establish IEBC partially indicate na bora nyora aga nyetara lenki parliament yako kora na bora nya moment ile tam amanye ko manyana kiako rosi IEBC. So really we plead with the civil society. The church recently became a strong critic. It has now taken the role of opposition. You can imagine, church leaders are coming up to tell the president or cite the president. Which role itakire kokoruna the politician and the opposition? But the church, after leading opposition yakule, then it takes up that role. So we hope the church will be able to put enough pressure on the president. Civil society groups, chiveke pressure. Totuare IEBC have established. That is the only way we can be sure of a free and fair election in 2027. I mean, how do you appoint a commissioner maybe 1 year to election and expect exercise independence? You know, already you've rewarded this a person kwa ire miremu obere romo akoyomo, he's still very no monto or submissive to the appointing authority. So we're expecting a back of affair. That is why we want these people service trained on independence, because as commissioners come to office, they are taken through various trainings, various courses that tell you then that as a commissioner you're supposed to be independent, how to exercise your duty, how to remain otalikoba influenced. I mean, for over a training year, 2, 3, 4 years would give you some skill ekonyara go avoid koba. I mean, konyara go bend to one side. But assume you're 1 year into office and the president calls you, go appointed, you know. That is why Kenyans are very fearful of a free and fair election without IEBC being formed in time. Yes.
It is giving me fear, and he's talking of free and fair elections come 2027. Probably, for real, 3 years at least, fair. But a year too, it becomes so tricky. Na gotuara free and fair elections probably come 2027. We can if things don't change as soon as possible, then we as Kenyans ntorase ale tricky kidogo. But meanwhile mancho mulgeria muliketo garopita kurase county ya Nyamira nikako manyenga abamenyi kurase orbebe ruwe wodi ya Magombo ne ya Gachuba chonsi chigotoka se bunge ya Kitutu Masabe county ya Nyamira nikobono be murunganire okubutoka kumorero ase chinsemo echo. Kwana Netaya TV ase kenyoro kiamiriri nigo banyeganirie ekiombe kiria gia Kenya Power anene monoro sagia ro Nyamira kuringoria omochando yo na okonyonyorera richibu anene mono kwenekia omuriro otariko ne kubutoka na ndo tabwati mochando onde bwensi ngajira genda sema ya karo ye studio tubana no muri kitogero Peter.
Biemano sana agigonda se orobebe rwe wodi ya Magombo ne wodi ya Gachuba chonsi kutoka se bunge ya Kitutu Masaba ime county Nyamira abage kerogolile abana bamenye korwa se chinseme chiga baberu bakwemurunganilia okogenda gosuko butuka kwa omolero abwase babwate amabori amange gukia sekombe kia Kenya Power orosagia rwa Nyamira igango tikatura igwango ng'akero kende okogani kwabo nkorokiko na kero kende kwimurunga ni kwabo nkorokiko iga korwa sechinseme chiga igoro yoko butoka kwomorero na kero kende omorero yekero chire oboibinko babore mechando ki igocha yabaletera tukatuchake noyo
twabeire ne mochando ase stimeye ntumatinga estimeye nigere ya Kenya Power gosine yo monyene ekogera guchakera kurwa tombe gocha miriri ense meyi ense pitu amenyiro musunte kirenga kiegocha ekogenda estimeye ato chandire miaka yensi na ntoro chibaita yaye abacha barusi chigwaya chiabo bagene nakyo ekogera kende ngeyo ntogo tukana ngoko no kende ntogo samba none merango bono yetu etasare nene twachandekire Kenya Power erigereri toigunga ne sense ebekire tombe essence yutiga kuya mesire mbura ya mesire estime kogenda yagenda matukabere yagenda matukatatu titwa nakorora buya bwa sitimantu kera lituko gocha etobwate egesunte abayina bwa baba imokire bago tuibera obyo
etukumetinga Kenya Power estimene ya Kenya Power etali yomonyene chi transformer chire chimbe chi transformer chiba chenchi bogaki barosi bogaki ntotama etinga miriria gose tokateneneire na tombe yo ekiagera toko pimeru toko igugego chake gekoenda tombaro mbabwate etobwate challenge chimbe igoro yestima buna bano botuko boibi bantu ntori no nyeno monto tugete no ne bichuchu ebingo tugera bale bichuchu chitibyo konyoronyo monto gwogeti no ne radio onye stima ya chiete koenda gegocha bune gocha gosamba kiregento bono asobwe ngentoro chi buya bwe stima etogo saba iga Kenya Power onye stima ye kerenga miriri raini ya miriri kurtombe miriri bana intori gwakana bate banya no gwakana tutali gwakana ikera chibesa gwakana tore batato abusa tali mosata onye intori bantu tutakire korora stima buna abande baje barusi chiwayechi moire tomanya intobugati stima ikiagera ntorochi faita asara yo katoroche eche nakoenda chisimi ntori gotwara okogore simi estima gegocha gekoenda gegocha yasambire tori komanya inga chinse koenda gose chinsa yachire tori komanya kere koenda naende kere gocha yongo saba Kenya Power gakia bakaji bamiriri onye intuandake chiraini chieito gose tokali gwakana chibese chinke chiraini tobugate chitari konyara go control go save morero buya mochando kibono totebi onye stima kere yo monyene erusi wa Kenya Power eta onye Kenya Power eto gwakana chitokeni motobekere stima buna abantu bande kina kitogo sa
Kenya Power etobwate bono transformer chire chinke kobuye chinde because miriri gaiga kere estimate iyo kwerende mumbu gachube estimate rororo bono tukubuli transformer tubwate chingao kitali chirimo chitabweka ni chire gachuba mumbu chikuru chikoleto muriro koru kiumbu goika koru tombega igaro problem kibona estimate yebwate eraini ya tombe kocha miriri mpaka magombo kwanza. In fact estima ya miriri yebwate shida bono Kenya Power mnanche bono nyekwarere cheko ngakarete kurende token lakini estima yamanya kogana token chichia estima kere gechiete transformer yani muriro nturi gutumeka asiki asengenjo ngakarete kurende token lakini tiri gutumeka stima onye stima yetiri gotokonya bantu ba Kenya Power mbago cha barusi stima yega tolete stima ngao eyira tokonya miriri kobwa gutwara stima chiwaya chiete igoro gaiga totabwa timule
tomanetina estimere yo monyene onye kere yo monyene tago togore metaire tomane stima teyo onye Kenya Power batato estimere erinde egesunte kere miriria kere nainde estima etogo pimerwa ya chalime wiki yagenda buna bono bina toreiga stima teyo emete toroche chiwaje reta no torigere stima teyo nimbwato hoteli yeye buna chiao sakora mbira nusu sikasa mujachire kere stima rororo kole mera libaleiga paka saa 2 iga nanyona chiranyona sabuni bono chitokeni echi ekere stima ngakiko na kana kere stima ya chira ndeye irani kakingu wakana egyo challenge ne gatiabu Kenya Power onye stima ne kere ino torosire stima erinde tokoraki tokore biashara
bono miriri ga iganto bwate biashara togokora estima ngo tokonyera ase biashara mochande bwato mobe bono kero kende buna bono nimbwate tingangosia abankonyora aba chikasoma challenge chibando chiato kestima yato kayagenda busaigo gafure karense yakendiriga nikendo kenda gwo kestima nga yachire bono yanyarekana kero kende chibande chinande bacha baira tinko basera bachi baira tinga ya magute karasa atambe kyari muntu akolemera likorana ncha naende nkonyora uri biashara ntubwate buna bone bechi saipa abantu bakurusi photocopy gochiabu na yana beko genda naende yatinye biashara igo nga estima nabo batoete buya lakini bona ande toete challenge esi nyinge nga gwikana tuligi mini so sini channel taturagore bone ina ende ngabuna ni estima totabwati igo nga yari konyarekana gaki Kenya Power na bayare korora nga muchando kyo estima yego tolentera butambe eko gerego igo chake naende yagenda so ndo chenga muchando ntubwate system
ekere estima taiyo oboibi boko bucha gesunte kiabe kenene igo Kenya Power eto ale gosabanga munyare ko bamogotokonya nonye no boibi obo nyale ko babogosira ose bana bagaka baminto tali
muna gwatigire kuigwa bana bananchi korwa se chiwodi bera wodi ya Magombo ne wodi ya Gachuba chonsi kutoka sebunge ya Kitutu masababere bago kwanera igoro yoko butoka kumulero ase chinseme chigago chakera chinsa chamagoroba bagotebanga ebintu nebinge bagotumeka umulero uyo asogo sambereri ase chitinga na biga asogo chajesi chisimi asobo tugi kerokende gogo kinie bichuchu bono noko boli go chase ekembe ya Kenya Power gose kampuni ya Kenya Power rosagia rwa Nyamira kwene kinga babere bagwe sokia na kolingolia chinseme chiga korwa ase chinsemo chia tombe weka chinsemo chia miririga elina barabo banyare kogokera obokoreri obuya bumulero korwa ase ekembe ya Kenya Power. Gweripotelia eta television kuraso rubebe rwe wodi ya Magombo ne wodi ya Gachuba chonsi kutoka sebunge ya Kitutu masabe me county ya Nyamira lietalia na igonkoro kwa Ogero Peter
Mwanchua muligerelia karibu na ende murubili Kwana Netaya chinga kitokana tukukwanara igoro yangana ya the IEBC dilemma iyo nuko ure wakili agendete kwarara na nigo nkomanyigwa mwanchua muligerelia mugabana bwe county ya Kisii nigo nkomanyigwa ngachinga kichiga niko aumirane kamati ye bunge ye senate ase okotema kwerera amangana yobutumeki bwechibesa tosukana nyanga ko mwanchua muligerelia kagara banyikweita amangana mbagendera ko yaitukayona yanda mange chikuraga sa eyamo yabona mubaso chinsa 10 chinsa bere chabotukona chinsa nye chabotuko kinga kitogotora mangana maya senchira yoboikernu no yanyoro onsi asenchira yoboikernu kinga kechiga teto kama wakili ndo kinga kichiko minyoka sana teto kama wakili baga turakwana bira tutone na mono the same issue ya IEBC enkwaro kwana igoro ya the possibilities wakili turaboraniga. We have said yes, we don't have a good opposition that might push as IEBC gotaboro. What of our abajumbe baitu? Babu get barabu se barabu no they are in a deep slumber. Na boro yoganyete babe led with their chief leader.
We realizing and toroche una MPs. You remember MPs in the first place. Finance bill nja etete parliament. Baadaye Bakenya bakayekana ekayeliwa. We've had instances parliament egoetia amachiko atali popular na Bakenya. The tax bill, I mean the finance bill, ya recommend a tax as Bakenya. You had njira abajumbe baito bangigorusi bande isiko bare ko Kwana ne kiburi, you know. Ngango etitole nkimoragole. That means and it is what they famously call state capture. The presidency, the executive, yanyali rekobwatana na the legislature, eba kukwano monwa yomo. Whereas the legislature takeire ko oversight the executive, but they have failed on that role because they have the majority in parliament. Once it has the majority, before IT kende gions, yokora kurangeli a parliamentary group meeting in State House, you never know what they exchange. Maybe they are lectured, and sometimes allowances go exchange to the hands. We hear those stories. So once by these allowances back one they go to parliament with one mind wake kura to support the serikali. So we do not as yekere ntoro hope kura as parliament as is currently, not unless Juzi Babo Wino was saying it takes you to suspend your reasoning kubwati siya serikali. And that means ayekubwati siya serikali kuikobo moliri. So currently as is currently bunere abantu abange ba suspended their reason ebabwazitie serikali including our MPs abange, a majority of them they have decided kubwazitie serikali kusikubwazitie executive the president for their own selfish reasons batigiro Mokenya rwanerere. And that is where Mokenya must come up through all social media, through all forms, konyara kurwanie binte bia serikali yakora. But from parliament, we don't expect, we don't see hope. Yes.
Maybe kamati ya bigetwe wakili na broad-based government currently.
Yes.
Diriba go beke sign yoko chake mangana yobona yoko ba in place ya IEBC. Kamati ya bigetwe, what is happening with them? Does it mean they were not empowered? They are under.
You know, Aziz, we can tell around June, July, the committee presented its report. The committee has finalized its part and handed over the recommendations to the president. Now, the report obviously was a desk here president. It is for the president to implement. He's the one who will delay the implementation because the committee, we saw Kalonzo was a member, the majority and the minority leaders, members, presented their report sometime between June, July, and August. So the president has the recommendations, and now he's the one sitting on that report. That's why Kenyans and civil society are asking him, can you proceed and implement, even without that report? You know, he has the powers to constitute. That report, the committee, come up na amendments to the constitution and the election, the IEBC Act. Barete more members, you remember? Batagetting as a commissioners balia, barete be kanisa babere, opposition here guli bageli mo seibere. You know, ligare error connect to be the face of the country. That was the main reason the establishment of that multi-sector committee yoko nyara kokoraki ko give amendments and recommendations. But beside that, the IEBC Act there is a vacancy in a commissioner, replace, you simply advertise. Once you advertise, people apply. Their qualifications, tota keiriobo mwanasiasa for the past 10 years, tota keiriobo ineni a civil servant or in civil service for a specific period. And if you meet those regulations, then you are appointed and you meet the thresholds independence according to the committee of it. So the president has options to either follow that report and make amendments, appoint IEBC, without amendment. Actually, that commission, that will give the independence and IEBC colleagues.
Maybe the last word in a second, kindly.
Biamono nagokire koberaga. I'm proud to be a viewer and a discussant for the invitation. Kwani abantu baito botambe nangoteba bagusi kitutu chache South na bogeka ward bakwani kabisa batomera makwani ane no mwana obo mukaya mumanyi or John Mwakili.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I'm proud to having been
Thank
here.
you. Thank you. Majobo lele wikirabo tukolera na ikiromwali wa murubili Kwana Netaya chinga kitwaro Kwana na wakili anaona mangana arengete ogotabaro kwa IEBC for almost 2-3 years down the line bono na butwaro kubona what are the possibilities ya IEBC koba aro